If you like storytime vibes, hit subscribe and let's dive in together.
It takes 10 years to build a life, but only a single crude sentence to burn it to the ground. I didn't leave my wife because she cheated in a hotel room. I left because she handed a knife to my enemies and smiled while they gutted me in public. You think you know the person sleeping next to you? Wait until you put them in a room full of people they're trying to impress. That's when the mask falls off. The invitation said, Class of 2014 Alumni Gala, but it should have read, Graveyard of Buried Insecurities. I didn't want to go. I knew exactly what these nights were, a parade of rented tuxedos and inflated egos. But Elena insisted. She was glowing, fixing her hair in the rearview mirror, talking about how great it would be to see the old crew. The crew. God, I hated them. We walked into the banquet hall, and the air immediately smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. These were our mutual college friends, people who knew us both before we were us. There was Greg, the former quarterback who peaked at 21 and was now drowning in alimony, and Jessica, the queen bee, who still treated every conversation like a mean girl audition. And then there was Derek. Derek was the guy Elena dated before me, the loud, brash, gym-obsessed alpha who treated her like an accessory. I was the one who picked up the pieces when he shattered her heart senior year. I was the safe choice, the engineer, the provider. Look who it is, the beauty and the bank account. Derek roared as we approached their table, his face already flushed with bourbon. The table erupted in laughter. A normal wife would have bristled. A loyal partner would have squeezed my hand. Elena, she laughed the loudest. She practically melted into the seat next to Jessica, her eyes lighting up with that desperate need for validation she only got from these toxic people. I felt the first knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just a joke. It was a testing of the waters. They were sharks, smelling for blood, checking to see if the fence around our marriage was electrified, and Elena just turned off the power. Oh, stop it, Derek, Elena giggled, leaning in way too close to the center of the table. Mark knows he's the responsible one. Someone has to be the adult, right? Responsible, Jessica sneered, swirling her martini. That's a nice word for boring, isn't it, Elle? The air grew heavy. This wasn't friendly banter. This was an ambush. I looked at Elena, waiting for her to defend us, to defend me. Instead, she took a long sip of her wine, her eyes glazing over with nostalgia for a time when she was wild, reckless, and yours truly wasn't in the picture. I mean, Derek smirked, locking eyes with me. University was a wild time. We all have our histories. Right, Mark? You ever wonder if Elena misses the excitement? I smiled, a cold practice thing. I think she prefers stability, Derek. Not everyone wants to live in a frat house forever. It was a good jab. But I didn't realize that by fighting back, I had just dared them to escalate. I had just challenged them to prove exactly how little respect my wife actually had for me. By the third round of tequila shots, the veneer of civilization had completely evaporated. The table was no longer a gathering of adults. It was a regression to the primitive. They were loud, sweaty, and gross. Derek had his arm draped over the back of Elena's chair, not touching her, but hovering, claiming territory. A subtle dominance display. I sat there, swirling my water, watching my wife transform into a stranger. She wasn't the woman who helped me pick out tile for the bathroom last week. She was Party Elena, a desperate creature hungry for approval from people who wouldn't piss on her if she were on fire. Jessica started the slide into the gutter. God, remember the locker room rumors? She slurred, her eyes wet and glassy, looking pointedly at Derek, then sliding her gaze to Elena. We used to talk about how gifted the football team was, especially the captains. Derek puffed his chest out like a strutting peacock, soaking in the ego stroke. We did okay, right, Elle? You never complained back then. My stomach churned, a physical wave of nausea hitting me. This was it. The disrespect was no longer subtle. It was a neon sign blinking in the middle of the restaurant. I looked at Elena. This was the moment. This was the line in the sand. Any woman with an ounce of dignity or love for her husband would have shut this down immediately. She should have said, "Show some respect." Instead, she swirled her drink, a flush rising on her cheeks, looking at them through her lashes. "Oh, Derek, don't be gross," she said. But she wasn't angry. She was smiling. That damned coquettish smile she used to give me. "I'm just asking a scientific question," Derek pressed, his voice dropping an octave, his eyes locking onto mine with a predatory glint. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Mark here looks like a compact guy. Efficient. But come on, Elle. Be honest with your old friends. Don't you ever miss the heavy machinery? The kind that really, fills the room?" The table went dead quiet. The air was sucked out of the conversation. It was a direct, vulgar challenge thrown right in my face, disguised as drunken banter. I felt the blood rush to my ears, a deafening roar of humiliation. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched Elena. I watched her lips part. I prayed she would slap him. I prayed she would throw her drink in his face. But as I looked into her eyes, I didn't see outrage. I saw the glint of alcohol and the desperate need to be the cool girl, winning the war against her conscience. The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. "Do you miss the heavy machinery?" A respectful wife would have been offended. A smart wife would have been dismissive. "Elena?" She looked at Derek, then at the braying crowd, and finally at me. She weighed her loyalty to me against the validation of a room full of washed-up jerks, and she made her choice. She smirked, took a dramatic sip of her drink, and delivered the line that ended our marriage. "Well," she drawled, her voice dripping with a toxic mix of pity and mockery, "let's just say quality is nice, Mark. But sometimes a girl just really misses the quantity." The table detonated. It was a nuclear explosion of laughter. Derek howled, slapping the table, tears of mirth streaming down his red face. Jessica pointed at me, gasping for air. They were laughing at me. And Elena, my wife, my partner, the woman I had supported through 2 career changes and a depressive episode. She was basking in it. She looked at me with a lighten-up shrug, as if she hadn't just publicly emasculated me for a cheap dopamine hit. I felt the blood drain from my face, but oddly, the nausea vanished. In its place, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. It was the feeling of a surgeon stepping into an operating room. The emotional connection I had to her didn't just break, it vaporized. I looked at her and saw nothing. No love, no history. Just a stranger with a cruel streak. I didn't storm out. I didn't shout. I smiled. A smile so calm, so devoid of warmth, that it cut through the noise like a scalpel. I picked up my glass, swirling the liquid gently. "You're absolutely right, Elena," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady enough to silence the person next to me. Then the next. Soon, the laughter died down, replaced by a confused hush. "Derek was definitely bigger," I continued, locking eyes with him. The smirk wiped off his face. "It's simple physics, really. Nature had to compensate for the absolute vacuum where his character, intelligence, and depth should be. You need a lot of physical space to house that much insecurity." Derek's mouth opened, but I didn't let him speak. I turned my gaze to Elena. She looked pale, her smile faltering. "And you, darling," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly conversational tone. "I suppose that explains why you settled for me. After years of being stretched thin by hollow men who treated you like a disposable toy, you needed a man to pay the bills and fix the damage they left behind. I just made the mistake of thinking you wanted a husband. Turns out, you just needed a sponsor while you fantasized about the circus." I raised my glass to the stunned, silent table. "2 small things," I toasted, my eyes dead. "Like dignity and self-respect. Because clearly, those are the only things in this room that are truly rare." The silence that followed my toast was heavier than the laughter had ever been. It was the kind of silence where you can hear the ice melting in the glasses. Rick, who had been laughing the hardest, was now staring at his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. Jessica looked like she had swallowed a lemon. I didn't wait for a rebuttal. I didn't wait for an apology that I knew would be fake. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a stack of cash, more than enough for the bill, but that wasn't the point. I let the bills flutter down onto the center of the table, covering the spilled wine and the remnants of their dignity. "That should cover the entertainment," I said, my voice smooth and detached. "I know how expensive it is to keep a circus running." I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and looked at them one last time. "Enjoy the rest of the night, everyone. I'll leave you to your jokes." Walking out of that banquet hall felt like dropping a 100-pound rucksack I hadn't realized I was carrying. The cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in years, my hands weren't shaking from anxiety or the need to please. They were shaking from the sheer adrenaline of freedom. For a decade, I had been her emotional punching bag, the safe harbor she resented because I wasn't a stormy sea. But as I stood under the orange glow of the streetlights, I didn't feel sad. I felt peace. The click-clack of high heels on the pavement broke the silence. Mark, stop!" Elena came stumbling out, her mascara slightly smudged, looking more like a panicked child than the confident woman who had just roasted me inside. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight, desperate. "You can't just leave," she hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? You made a scene." I looked at her hand on my arm, then up at her eyes. "I made a scene?" I asked, genuinely amused. "You just sold my dignity for a few laughs from a guy who peaked in 2014 and you're worried about your embarrassment?" "It was a joke!" she shouted, her voice cracking. Tears started to well up, the weapon she always used when she was losing an argument. "God, you're so sensitive. We were just having fun. You're really throwing away our marriage over a stupid drunk joke?" I unlocked my car door and turned to face her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke with the terrifying finality of a judge delivering a sentence. "No, Elena, I'm not leaving because it was a joke," I said softly. "I'm leaving because it wasn't." She froze. "It was the truth you finally said out loud," I continued. "Tonight you didn't just make a joke. You showed everyone exactly how little respect you have for me. You showed me that to you. I'm just a placeholder until you find someone bigger, someone wilder, someone like them." "That's not true. I love you," she sobbed, reaching for me again. "You don't love me," I said, stepping back. "You love the safety I provide. You love the house I bought, but you don't respect me, and I can't stay married to someone who thinks my worth is measured by a punchline." I got into the car. She banged on the window, mouthing apologies, her face contorted in ugly, belated regret. I didn't look back. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the house of cards to collapse in the rearview mirror. 2 weeks after that night, I filed for divorce. It wasn't a negotiation, it was an eviction notice for the toxicity in my life. She called, she texted, she even showed up at my office with puffy eyes and handwritten letters. But the switch had been flipped. Once respect dies, love is just a ghost haunting an empty house. I didn't hate her. I just didn't know her anymore. I moved into a small apartment downtown. It didn't have a manicured lawn or a granite kitchen island, but it had something the big house never did. Silence. Peace. I started hitting the gym, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself that I could carry heavy things and not break. I got a promotion. I started traveling. I was rebuilding myself, brick by brick, into a fortress she could never breach again. As for Elena, the grapevine is a small world. I heard the cool crowd dumped her about a month after I left. Turns out, without my salary to fund the VIP tables and the bottle service, she wasn't quite as fun to have around. Derek went back to his ex-wife. Jessica found a new target. Elena was left alone with the hangover of a lifetime. A year later, I ran into her at a coffee shop. Fate has a funny sense of humor. She looked different. The sparkle was gone. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, wearing a cardigan that looked too big for her. She saw me and froze. Then, she gave me a sad, tentative smile. "You look good, Mark," she said, her voice small. "Really good," I nodded, polite but distant. "Thanks, I feel good. It's amazing what happens when you cut out the dead weight." She winced, biting her lip. She looked down at her coffee, swirling the cup, a nervous habit I used to find endearing, but now just found pathetic. "I miss you," she whispered. "I wish I could take that night back. I wish I had never said that joke." I leaned in slightly, looking her dead in the eye. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a profound sense of gratitude. I don't, I said calmly. She looked up, confused. What? I'm glad you said it, I told her, my voice steady. If you hadn't, I might have spent the rest of my life trying to prove my worth to someone who couldn't count. You didn't break me, Elena. You woke me up. I stood up, checking my watch. I had a date later with a woman who laughed with me, not at me. Take care of yourself, I said, and this time, I didn't drop any money. She wasn't worth the price of admission anymore. I walked out into the sunlight, leaving her in the shadow of the past, right where she belonged. So there you have it, my friends. Sometimes people think they're drowning you for a cheap laugh, but they are actually washing the scales from your eyes so you can finally see the truth. Never cling to a relationship where you are the punchline in their story. If you were Mark in this story, would you have forgiven Elena when she came back to apologize a year later, or is respect, once lost, permanently impossible to regain? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.